Donald Trump just gave a roadmap to his own deeply dark and disturbing past that he wants to conceal, involving his first wife, Ivana, as well as his overall views about sexual assault and domestic violence. This is something he's been trying to cover up, so we at the MeidasTouch Network will bring it right to the surface. So Donald Trump accidentally exposed his own dark past when he was giving a speech yesterday at the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., and he said that it doesn't count as crime in Washington, D.C. when a man attacks a woman. Domestic violence, according to Donald Trump, should not be counted as a crime, or as Trump says it, if a man has a, quote, little fight with the wife, they say this is a crime, and Trump says it should not be counted as a crime. I want to share with you Donald Trump's past with Ivana, where she says that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her. She uses the word rape, and then she had a legal issue with Donald Trump, and she sort of issued a retraction and sort of didn't after saying these things at a deposition. I want to share that with you, but I also want to share with you as well what Donald Trump is doing to a program known as VOCA, the Victims of Crime Act. And Donald Trump is preventing cities and states to get their VOCA, Victims of Crime Act funding, which is to support domestic violence victims, sex trafficking victims, underage sex trafficking victims, and the states would normally have access to these funds to help people get out of sex trafficking rings, to help domestic violence victims, survivors, leave their home where oftentimes their abuser resides. And Donald Trump is depriving states of that funding. And it all goes back to Donald Trump's sick and twisted past. And so if you take a look at a book that was published back in 1993. You see it right here. It's called The Lost Tycoon, The Many Lives of Donald J. Trump. It talks about Donald Trump's sick and twisted past, and the author derived a lot of this from depositions taken of Ivana Trump. And let's take a look at what Ivana Trump said and what is stated in this book, and then we'll look at Ivana's so-called retraction, and you could judge for yourself what really went down. But this is from the book. It says, Ivana Trump has been relaxing in the master bedroom of the Trump Tower triplex, thinking about the trip she will be going to take to Tahiti. The trip will not just be for a vacation. It has to do with the Donald's business. Lauren Edis, the widow of the late Trump Gaming Division executive Mark Edis, will be going with her. Ivana has been hoping the trip will help them get over the tragedy of the helicopter crash. Suddenly, according to Ivana, the Donald storms into the room. He's looking very angry and he's cursing out loud. Your fucking doctor has ruined me, he screams. The Donald flings Ivana down onto the bed, then he pins back her arms and grabs her by the hair. The part of her head he is grabbing corresponds to the spot in his head where the scalp reduction operation has been done. The Donald starts ripping out Ivana's hair by the handful as if he's trying to make her feel the same kind of pain that he is feeling. Ivana starts crying and screaming. The entire bed is being covered with strands of her golden locks, but the Donald is not finished. He rips off her clothes and unzips his pants. Then he jams his penis inside her for the first time in more than 16 months. Ivana is terrified. This is not lovemaking. This is not romantic sex. It is a violent assault. She later describes what the Donald is doing to her in no uncertain terms. According to the versions, she repeats to some of her closest confidants, quote, he raped me. When the Donald finally pulls out, Ivana jumps up from the bed. Then she runs upstairs to her mother's room. She locks the door and stays there crying for the rest of the night. The next morning, Ivana musters up the courage to return to the master bedroom. The Donald is there waiting for her. He leaves, no doubt, that he knows exactly what he did to her the night before. As she looks in horror at the ripped out hair scattered all over the bed, he glares at her and asks with a menacing casualness, does it hurt? Then here's the postscript statement about this from the author. On April 7, 1993, when the first printing of The Lost Tycoon was awaiting shipment, The publisher who had met with Donald Trump and his lawyers on March 3rd received the following communication from Donald Trump's lawyers. The statement by Ivana Trump does not contradict or invalidate any information contained in this book, and it is included here only to give full expression to the differing points of view on an important event. Statement of Ivana Trump. During the deposition given by me in connection with my matrimonial case, I stated that my husband had raped me. I wish to say that on one occasion during 1989, Mr. Trump and I had marital relations in which he behaved very differently toward me than he had during our marriage. As a woman, I felt violated, as the love and tenderness which he normally exhibited toward me was absent. I refer to this as a rape, but I do not want my words to be interpreted in a literal or criminal sense. Any contrary conclusions would be an incorrect and most unfortunate interpretation of my statement, which I do not want to be interpreted in a speculative fashion, and I do not want the press to misconstrue any of the facts set forth above. All I wish is for this matter to be put to rest. This statement can only be released and used in its entirety. Approved, Ivana M. Trump, dated April 6, 1993. So you take that statement right there and you put it together with what Donald Trump said yesterday, where he claims that if a man has a, quote, little fight with the wife, they say this is a crime. See, that shouldn't be counted as a crime, Donald Trump says. So here's what he said yesterday. Here, play this clip.
It's more than 87%, virtually nothing, and much lesser things that take place in the home they call crime. You know, they'll do anything they can to find something. If a man has a little fight with the wife, they say this was a crime. See, so now I can't claim 100%. But we are a safe city. You can walk to a restaurant. You can walk to the White House if you work there. You can walk to the Capitol. And even the Democrats say, I can't believe it, but they don't want to admit it, but I can't believe it. We could do the same thing in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. We did it. We saved Los Angeles.
And that is generally Donald Trump's view towards women victims in general, right? He's saying all the women involved in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring are part of a hoax. He says this is a massive Democratic hoax. It's utterly disgusting that he says that. And just think about how he treats Ivana in her death. In 2022, she died under fairly mysterious circumstances. She allegedly fell downstairs at her Manhattan townhouse, which, by the way, they can't sell right now. They've had to drop the price by like $12 million. And still nobody wants to buy it for, I think, obvious reasons. But then Donald Trump buries Ivana in the back lot of Bedminster. Ivana Trump's grave is completely overgrown at Trump's Bedminster golf course. I mean, just think to have your first wife. Why would she want to be buried in the back lot of Bedminster and then have these shrubs grow over it when Daily Mail exposed that? I think it gives you a lot of insight into what a sicko Donald Trump is, and frankly, how the children are okay with that. It is awfully disgusting. Also, some strange links between Trump, Ivana, and the Russians. Yes, Donald, Russia. But the reality is, I don't even have to go deep into like your 1980 meetings with Russia. You invited Putin to Alaska and you continue to post like photos with him as though you are like a lover, like in a honeymoon phase with the guy, and you've imposed no sanctions on Russia. I now have learned that we are importing eggs from Russia. You are as weak and obsequious to Putin as imaginable in front of our eyes. So I don't even need to delve deep like this, but you take a look at even Trump's own words in The Art of the Deal. In January 1987, I got a letter from Yuri Dubinin, the Soviet ambassador to the U.S. that began, "It's a pleasure for me to relay some good news from Moscow." It went on to say that the leading Soviet state agency for international tourism, the Gosminotourist, by the way, that's KGB aligned, had expressed interest in pursuing a joint venture to construct and manage a hotel in Moscow. On July 4th, I flew with Ivana, her assistant, Lisa Calandra, and Norma to Moscow. It was an extraordinary experience. We toured a half a dozen potential sites for a hotel, including several near Red Square. We stayed in Lenin Suite at the National Hotel, and I was impressed with the ambition of the Soviet officials to make the deal. You know, Donald Trump was always infatuated with the Russians. That's, I think, putting it mildly right there. Now, I wanted to talk about the Victims of Crime Act because VOCA funds, as Michael Bennet, Senator Bennet of Colorado, explains, VOCA funds help ensure crime victims can access emergency shelter, sexual assault exams, funeral funds, and counseling. Withholding federal VOCA dollars is a slap in the face to survivors of violent crimes. I stand with Colorado's leaders and frankly everybody in the country who are fighting back against Trump administration's unlawful attempts to keep VOCA funds from the Colorado survivors who need them. And it's not just Colorado. He focuses a lot on blue states, but it's really across the country. He's prohibiting VOCA funds, Victims of Crime Act funds, to help sex trafficking victims and domestic violence act victims. I mean, how cruel can you be? I mean, this is a regime who attacks our veterans and veterans' healthcare and healthcare of Americans in general. And so it's not surprising that their cruelty stretches into victims of domestic violence and sex trafficking, okay? Especially as Donald Trump calls Epstein sex trafficking a hoax. But I think it's important that you hear this.
Scientists are fighting back against the Trump administration's attack on our climate. Let me interrupt Ben for a quick minute to fill you in. More than 85 scientists from around the world have released a blistering rebuttal to a recent U.S. Department of Energy report that downplayed the threat of climate change. The DOE review commissioned under the Trump administration in July argued that climate change is, quote, less damaging economically than commonly believed. But scientists say the report is riddled with cherry-picked data, misquotes, and outright errors, and was written conveniently by a hand-picked team of 5 authors who reject the overwhelming scientific consensus. Quote, this report makes a mockery of science, said Dr. Andrew Dessler, one of the experts behind the 500-page rebuttal. He accused the DOE of misrepresenting research, relying on anecdotes, and ignoring established facts. Among the flaws, the DOE actually claimed that rising carbon dioxide could be a net benefit for U.S. agriculture without mentioning how extreme heat is devastating crops. It also dismissed evidence of human-caused ocean warming that is destroying coral reefs worldwide. Dr. Kim Cobb of Brown University called the DOE's omission of ocean impacts a, quote, glaring failure, stressing that humanity is living through a period of unprecedented warmth. She warned that the biggest danger is the report being used as a foundation for future environmental policy. Scientists emphasize that unlike the DOE review, their rebuttal underwent a rigorous peer process. Quote, it's like a feather on one side versus 1,000 pounds of metal on the other, Cobb said. Meanwhile, Trump has continued dismantling climate protections in his second term, expanding oil and gas production, and rolling back over 200 environmental safeguards. The Trump administration is counting on you not to care about this. So, and I want to emphasize this, if climate is important to you, leave your thoughts in the comments below, share your stories, and let's make some noise. Okay, Ben? Back to you.
So let me show you New York Attorney General Matt Platkin. Here's on Legal AF, and he says, look, you know, the initial Victims of Crime Act was passed under Ronald Reagan. He jokingly says a notorious liberal, because we as a nation were not supporting people who had gone through unimaginable horrors. Yet here we are for the first time ever, Donald Trump attacking victims, sex trafficking victims and domestic violence victims. So here's how he's doing it systemically. Here, play this clip.
This case really, frankly, shocks me that we had to file. You noted 40 plus years ago, the noted liberal Ronald Reagan signed into law the Victims of Crime Act because we as a nation were not supporting people who had gone through these unimaginable horrors. We're talking about sexual assault victims, victims of domestic violence, gun violence victims, child sex abuse victims. These are the types of people and their families and loved ones who benefit from this program. It supports them in moments of need. I can't think of something that is less political than that. And yet here we are for the first time ever having an administration say, unless you bend the knee and do something that courts and Congress have said you don't have to do with respect to mass immigration enforcement, we're not going to fund your victim services. We're going to tell these incredibly vulnerable people that they're out of luck. I think it's unconscionable. And I think this case, among all of the cases we've done, is frankly the most shocking that we've had to file.
And then the types of people that Donald Trump is trying to protect are Republican leaders, like Oklahoma Republican state representative right here, who I'm going to share with you. He was guilty of assaulting his wife, then running his daughter's car off the road as she tried to escape. On video, the daughter is heard saying, "Mama, make him stop, please. He's going to kill us." Earlier, he tried to gouge his wife's eyes out after trapping her in a bathroom. This is MAGA Republican State Representative Ty Burns of Oklahoma. He only pled guilty to one misdemeanor of domestic abuse and 2 misdemeanor counts of assault. You think about the privilege there, that it was just misdemeanors. He's stepping down from some committees, but vowed not to resign from office. Staying in office, he only got misdemeanors for this heinous crime. But these are the types of people that Donald Trump and MAGA Mike Johnson and Jim Jordan have made a career of covering up their conduct and protecting these types of people. Here, play this clip.
Oklahoma State Representative Ty Burns still in office, despite admitting he tried to gouge out his wife's eyes and later run his teen daughter and a relative off the road.
You know, it's unfortunate that Oklahoma ranks high in domestic abuse. It's especially worrisome when a state leader is caught up in that.
New court documents News 4 got a hold of say Burns and his wife got into an argument back in April. Burns accusing his wife of letting their 16-year-old daughter have alcohol. Court documents say Burns was verbally abusive to his wife and pushing her around. A female relative and 3 of his minor children overhearing everything. His wife told the female relative to leave for safety, then brought her 16-year-old daughter out to the relative's van. Burns started shaking and pushing the van as they left, screaming at the female relative to get the expletive out of here. I hate you. You are the cause of all these problems. Burns then following the van with his truck, the female relative having to weave and speed to get away. He forced their van into a ditch, injuring his daughter and the relative. Then Burns, once a teacher and law enforcement officer, shouted at the female relative, "I'm going to make sure you go down. I'm going to kill you," before leaving in his truck with his daughter.
I think it's significant that this representative has a law enforcement background and teacher coaching background.
Documents also mention an incident from last November when Burns' wife said he forcefully tried to gouge her eye out with his finger, breaking a blood vessel.
Even more significant, the police investigator brought up an incident that happened a fair amount of time before the road rage incident. And one has to wonder if he or she did not see a pattern and is concerned.
OSBI investigators passed their findings to Attorney General Gentner Drummond's office to prosecute. Burns pleaded guilty on Thursday, receiving a 1-year suspended sentence and agreeing to attend counseling. Drummond saying Burns received the strongest punishment possible for a first-time offender with a clean record. In a statement, Burns blamed his behavior on having PTSD, saying, "I deeply regret what occurred and am prepared to be held accountable for my actions." On Friday, Governor Stitt, as well as House Democratic leaders, called on him to resign.
And then finally, I think it's important that you also know that there was a relationship between Ivana and Jeffrey Epstein, Ivana and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine and Ivana were like best friends. They'd hang out together. Ivana hired people who previously worked for Epstein and Ghislaine. Ivana was, again, the way Ghislaine had described it to one of Epstein's sex trafficking victims, Maria Farmer, was in the divorce between Donald and Ivana. Donald got Jeffrey and Ghislaine got Ivana, and that's how they would talk about it. Here's Maria Farmer, an Epstein sex trafficking victim, saying that I always saw Ivana as Ghislaine's best friend. Here, play this clip.
Ivana Trump was like her best friend.
And with
Ivana.
Yeah, with Ivana, then, yeah, describe that, you know, she'd be there, how
That
often?
was creepy. So at the time, Ivana had this, she was doing QVC, selling jewelry, right? Online. I mean, on TV. She was like a QVC queen. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was always hanging out with Epstein, and Ivana was always hanging out with Ghislaine.
Right.
And Ivana would say, "We're going to go pick up Ivana, or Ivana's going to come," and we'd ride in the car with her. And I remember one occasion where Ghislaine's like, "I have to get out right now," and she went and got a number from a child, and I saw in a uniform.
Yeah. And
Everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody who surrounded them knew exactly what they were doing.
And but how often? Did you go for rides often with her and Ivana? Or,
Yes.
And would she pick up girls all the time?
Yes. She didn't bring them in the car. She would get their phone numbers.
Right.
But she would drive by schools.
Right. So
as they got out.
So would she?
Yeah.
And what's Ivana doing at this point? What
Sitting in the car. And I'll never forget because one day I was really weirded out by what had happened. I was really weirded out. So I'm sorry, my phone's beeping in. Just give it a second. But anyway, I've got to go in a second. But I just wanted to tell you, I was weirded out when they were driving around with this. So Gilanda shut me up, gave me one of those cheap bracelets Ivana was selling on QVC, and said, "Ivana wants you to have this." And I threw it in the garbage.
And then lastly, I'll show you this video of Donald Trump saying that in connection with his marriage to Ivana, they rarely got into fights, he said, because she does whatever the hell I tell her to do. Here, play this clip.
Do you all argue?
Yes, but not greatly. I'll tell you truthfully, we don't have tremendous fights. We should have world record-setting fights, but we really don't. We get along very well, and there's not a lot of disagreement because ultimately Ivana does exactly as I tell her to do.
See, wait a minute.
Male chauvinist.
Right, men? Is that right?
So a lot of Donald Trump's horrific policies are also rooted in his horrific past, right? He hates windmills because he didn't like the windmills at Aberdeen Golf Course. And so now he attacks America's, energy. Donald Trump's past as a sexual predator informs his behavior right now in office. Donald Trump's own conduct of engaging in sexual assault, domestic violence informs the fact that he is attacking the victims of domestic assault and sex trafficking victims while covering up for the biggest pedo sex trafficking ring, Epstein's sex trafficking, before our very eyes, right? That's what's happening. So I want to call it all out. I want to expose it all. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to very methodically show you the receipts. You could do with this information what you want, but it's important that we just have the receipts, the facts. Here's what Ivana said. I didn't say it. Here's what his wife, who's now dead, said, who died under mysterious circumstances. Here's what she said. Here's what the sex trafficking victim said. Here is what Donald Trump said. Here is what is happening with the VOCA, with the Victims of Crime Act. You form your opinions, but, I'm going to share. I'm just going to give you the real information. This isn't corporate news. I'm going to tell you what's up. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million. Thanks for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.